Imagine for a second that you are looking at a map of India. But it's not the map you know today. It's not a solid block of color with defined borders, highways, and state lines.
Not at all.
Instead, picture a fractured mosaic. It's a mess, frankly. You're looking at a collection of warring tribes, small, fierce republics, and ambitious chieftains who are constantly at each other's throats.
It's absolute chaos.
It is. It's the kind of environment where you sleep with a sword under your pillow.
It's effectively the Game of Thrones era of Indian history. We're talking about the 6th century BC. The Vedic age is transitioning, and political ambition is just exploding all over the place.
Right.
But then, almost out of nowhere, one specific region starts to rise above all that noise. And they don't just do it through brute force, though. Let's be honest. There was plenty of blood spilled.
Oh, I'm sure.
They do it through, well, elephants, massive iron mines, and some very clever, very strategic marriage alliances.
And that is the moment everything changes. We are talking about the consolidation of the 16 Mahajanapadas into the very first great Indian empire.
Exactly.
And just when things are getting organized in the east, a young Greek conqueror named Alexander storms through the northwest, totally changing the game on the other side of the subcontinent.
It is a complete collision of worlds. You have the rise of Magadha in the east, and then this massive shock of Alexander in the west. And, you know, these aren't just stories. These are the blueprints of ancient statecraft. We are seeing the birth of bureaucracy, the birth of standing armies, and the birth of diplomacy.
Welcome to a very special edition of The Deep Dive. We are going to unpack the architecture of power in ancient India. This deep dive is brought to you by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. We are so glad you're here with us to geek out on history.
It's a real pleasure. This era is dense. I mean, really dense, but it is incredibly rewarding if you know where to look. It's the foundation for everything that comes later.
Before we jump into the iron mines and the war elephants, I do have a humble request for everyone listening. If you find value in what we do, please subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
It really helps.
It's the best way to keep these deep dives coming. We put a lot of work into synthesizing this massive amount of material for you, so hitting that subscribe button makes a real difference.
And listen, if you are capable, supporting the team on Patreon is a huge help. It allows the team to keep creating this super useful content without cutting any corners. A massive shout out and a specific thank you to all our current supporters.
Yes, thank you.
You are the ones who make this kind of deep analysis possible.
Absolutely. Also, please engage with us. Like the video or audio, share your valuable comments. It really does help the algorithm find other learners just like you. And for the students out there who need the hard copies,
The notes?
exactly. Free notes with practice PYQs, previous year questions, are available on the public Telegram channel.
And for those who want to go the extra mile, you know, the serious aspirants who need every edge they can get, you can DM on the public Telegram channel to join the private Telegram library.
What do they get there?
That grants access to all the videos in this series, organized premium notes, detailed explanations, extra PYQs, and even model mains answers. It's a real treasure trove.
Okay, housekeeping done. Let's set the stage. Our source material today is primarily the Tamil Nadu Board Class XI history book, specifically Chapter 5, which covers the rise of Magadha and Alexander's invasion.
Great source.
But we aren't stopping there. To give you the full picture, we are also pulling selected excerpts regarding the Mauryas, the Guptas, and Harsha, plus we're integrating some intense analysis of UPSC previous year question papers from 2017 all the way to 2025.
So we're covering a massive timeline. We're starting around the 6th century BC, which is that transition from the later Vedic period, around 1000 to 600 BC, and we're moving forward into the Age of Empires. We're tracing the shift of political gravity, you know, from the tribal lands of the Northwest down to the fertile plains of the Ganges.
So let's start with the landscape, the 6th century BC. We keep hearing this term, Mahajanapadas. It sounds grand, but let's break it down. What exactly are we looking at?
The term comes from the Buddhist text, Anguttara Nikaya, and it literally translates to something like great kingdoms or great footholds of the people. The text lists 16 of them.
16.
You have names that might sound familiar to anyone who has, you know, glanced at a map of ancient India: Anga, Magadha, Kasi, Kosala, Vatsa, and Avanti.
16 kingdoms. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Were they all equal? Or was it like the UN, where some people have veto power and others are just happy to be there?
Definitely not equal, not even close. It was a dog-eat-dog world.
Yeah.
While there were 16 on paper, in reality it was a massive four-way rivalry. The smaller ones were just pawns in the game.
So who are the big players?
The real battle royale was between the heavyweights: Magadha, Kosala, Vatsa, and Avanti. They were constantly fighting for supremacy, trying to absorb the smaller states, making alliances, breaking them. Just total chaos.
And as we know, Magadha wins. That's the big question for me. Why Magadha? Was it just that they had better kings, or was there a secret sauce? Because looking at the map, they're tucked away in the east modern-day Bihar. That doesn't seem like the obvious center of power compared to, say, the traditionally dominant Northwest.
It's a great question, and the answer is a mix of leadership and what I call geographic determinism. You have to look at where Magadha sits. First, it's located strategically between the upper and lower Gangetic Valley.
So it's a choke point.
It is a strategic choke point for trade. If you want to move goods up or down the river, which was the highway of the ancient world, you have to deal with Magadha. You have to go through them.
So location, location, location. They basically controlled the toll booth.
Precisely. But it's also about what was in the land. The soil in that region was and still is incredibly fertile. And in the ancient world, surplus food is the currency of power. If you have surplus grain, you can support a standing army. You don't need your soldiers to go home and farm every harvest season. You can keep them in the barracks, training, ready to fight.
That's a huge advantage over a tribal militia that has to go home to harvest wheat or their families starve.
Exactly. It professionalized warfare for them. But the real game changer, the real secret sauce, it was iron.
The Iron Age advantage.
There were rich iron ores in the hills near Rajgir, which was the early capital. This meant Magadha had better weapons than their neighbors. While others might be using copper or, inferior metals, Magadha is forging iron swords, iron arrowheads.
And not just for war, I assume.
That's the key. Even more importantly, they had iron agricultural tools.
To clear the forests.
Yes, the Gangetic Plain was dense jungle back then. You couldn't clear it with bronze or copper axes. It would take forever. Iron axes meant you could clear that land faster, plant more rice, get more surpluses, and
fund a bigger army.
It's a feedback loop, a perfect cycle of power. And near Gaya, they had copper deposits too. Magadha was literally sitting on a gold mine, or rather an iron mine.
So they had the money, the food, and the metal. Now they just needed the leaders to use it. This brings us to the Haryanka dynasty. Let's talk about Bimbisara.
Bimbisara. He ruled from 546 to 494 BC. He was a capable general, sure, but he was a master of what we call the matrimonial alliance.
I love this part. He didn't just conquer, he married his way to power. It feels very strategic, almost cold and calculating.
It was pure foreign policy. He had 3 distinct wives who brought massive strategic value to the kingdom. First, Kosala Dey. She was the sister of Prasenajit, the king of Kosala, one of those big 4 rivals we mentioned.
So he's sleeping with the enemy, so to speak.
And it paid off handsomely. Her dowry was the Kasi region.
The Kasi region, as in Varanasi. That's not just a plot of land, that's huge revenue.
Massive revenue. It filled his treasury. Then his second major marriage was to Chalana, a Lichavi princess from Vaisali. That secured his northern frontier, so he didn't have to worry about attacks from that side.
Okay, so that's the north covered.
And third, he married Kema, a princess from Madra in central Punjab. This gave him a foothold and friendly relations in the west.
So let's just map this out. He's got the north secured with Vaisali, the west influenced by his marriage in Punjab, and a huge cash flow coming in from Kasi. That leaves him free to point his shiny new iron weapons somewhere else.
Exactly. He focused his military might on Anga, a neighbor to the east, which gave him access to the river trade routes of the Ganges Delta and the sea. He built the foundation of the empire through these very calculated moves, but his son was a different story.
Ajatashatru, the aggressive one.
Ajatashatru didn't have the patience for these slow-burn alliances. He was ruthless. He eventually imprisoned his own father to take the throne. And in terms of foreign policy, he chose war over marriage every single time.
So he went after his neighbors.
He went to war with his own uncle, Perenajit of Kosala. And then he set his sights on destroying the Lichavi Confederacy of Vaisali, his own mother's people.
Wait, he attacked his mother's family? That's cold.
It was a bloody, brutal expansion. He fought a war of attrition against Vaisali that lasted 16 years. But he won. He used new military technologies. The accounts mention a catapult-like machine for throwing stones and a chariot with maces attached to the wheels, almost like an ancient tank.
That sounds like something out of a movie.
Ugh.
But here is the contradiction that I find fascinating. This is a time of bloody wars, parricide, and conquest. But it's also the time of the great spiritual awakening in India.
That's the paradox of the 6th century BC. As these states became more powerful and cities grew, there was also a sense of social dislocation. People were looking for answers beyond the old, complex Vedic rituals.
And this is when the Buddha and Mahavira are active.
Right in the middle of all this. And while Ajatashatru was fighting these wars, he actually met both the Buddha and Mahavira.
It's wild to think of a warlord who imprisoned his own father, sitting down to have a philosophical discussion with the Buddha.
It shows how central Magadha had become. It wasn't just the political capital, it was the spiritual laboratory of India. In fact, after the Buddha's death, it was Ajatasattu, the same man who convened the first Buddhist council at Rajagriha.
Talk about a PR pivot. From warmonger to patron of a new religion.
It solidified Magadha's status. And this trend continued into the Shishunaga dynasty, which followed the Haryankas. They finally defeated the Pradyota dynasty of Avanti, that last old rival, and Ashoka, a Shishunaga king, hosted the second Buddhist council at Vaisali.
Okay, so Magadha's growing. They've knocked out the other big rivals. But then comes a dynasty that seems to ramp everything up to 11, the Nandas.
The Nandas represent the peak of this early imperial phase. Mahatma Nanda is a fascinating figure. He is often called the Ekarat, the sole sovereign.
Sole sovereign, I like that.
He claimed to have uprooted all the Kshatriya dynasties. He wasn't from a traditional royal lineage. He was an empire builder who just broke all the old rules.
He sounds terrifying. Uprooting dynasties is some pretty strong language.
He was effective. The Hathagumpa inscription mentions he even conquered Kalinga, down on the east coast. But the Nandas are most famous, or perhaps infamous, for their wealth.
I read in the source notes that a Tamil Sangam work actually mentions this. That surprised me. I mean, that's a long way away.
Yes, the Ahana Nuru by the poet Manmulanar. It references the immense wealth of the Nandas, which was supposedly hidden under the waters of the Ganges.
That's such a cool connection. A poet in the Deep South writing about the wealth of a king in Bihar. It shows how far their reputation had traveled.
Indeed. But that wealth, it came at a cost. The last ruler, Dhanananda, was known for his oppressive taxation. He squeezed the peasantry to fund that massive army and that legendary treasury. He was incredibly unpopular.
Which creates the perfect opening for a revolution later. But hold on, before we get to the fall of the Nandas, we have to look west. Because while Maga is solidifying the east, the northwest is getting absolutely hammered by foreign powers.
Yes, the northwest modern Pakistan and Afghanistan has always been the gateway. While Magadha was protected by rivers and forests, the northwest was open. And long before Alexander, we had the Persians.
This is the Persian connection. I feel like this gets skipped over in a lot of history classes. We jump straight from the Mahajanapadas to Alexander.
It really shouldn't be skipped. It's the precursor to everything. Cyrus the Great was the first to enter India, capturing Gandhara. But it was Darius I in 518 BC who really made a mark. He annexed Punjab and Sindh.
And he didn't just raid it, he made it a formal province, right?
Yes, the 20th satrapy of the Persian Empire. And get this, the Persian records say it was the most fertile and populous province of the entire Persian Empire. It was the jewel in their crown.
So what did they get from it?
They paid a massive tribute in gold dust. India was the cash cow for the Persian Empire.
But it wasn't just a one-way street of tribute, was it?
Not at all. There was a lot of cultural exchange. Indo-Iranian commerce boomed. And this is when the Kharosthi script was introduced in the Northwest.
That's the one written right to left, like Arabic or Hebrew.
Correct. It was derived from Aramaic, which was the official script of the Persian Empire. And later, when we see Mauryan art, those famous monolithic pillars of Ashoka stelae trace the influence of that high polish and the bell-shaped capitals back to Persian models.
Interesting.
The very idea of inscribing royal edicts on stone for the public to see, that likely came from the Persians too. Darius did it first.
So the Persians soften up the northwest, they create this infrastructure of satrapies, and then in 327 BC comes the storm, Alexander the Great.
Alexander had just crushed the Persian Empire. He defeated Darius III. But he wasn't satisfied. He had these Greek myths in his head about India's legendary wealth, accounts from historians like Herodotus who wrote about, well, gold-digging ants.
Gold-digging ants, seriously.
It was probably a misunderstanding of marmots digging up gold dust in the Himalayas, but it fueled the Greek imagination. Alexander also had a geographical curiosity. He genuinely thought the ocean was just on the other side of eastern India. He wanted to find the end of the world.
So he thought if he just pushed a little further, he'd find the sea.
That was the idea. So he crosses the Hindu Kush Mountains, and the reception is, well, it's mixed.
To say the least.
The Northwest was completely fragmented into small tribal republics. Some fought fiercely, some surrendered. And then you have Ambi, the ruler of Taxila. He's often cited in Indian history as the archetype of the traitor.
He just rolled out the welcome mat for Alexander.
He did. He welcomed him.
Why? Was it just cowardice?
More likely pragmatism. He was probably hoping to use the Greeks against his own local rival, a king named Porus. He saw an opportunity to let this foreign army take out his neighbor for him.
And that leads us to the big showdown, the Battle of Hydaspes, Alexander versus Porus.
This is 326 BC, on the banks of the Jhelum River. The Greek name for it was Hydaspes. And this was not an easy win for Alexander, not by a long shot. Porus fought with a large corps of war elephants, which the Greeks and their horses weren't used to facing in such number.
That must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. The battle was fierce. The monsoon rains made the ground muddy, which neutralized the famous Indian chariots. It was a complete bloodbath. In the end, Porus eventually lost.
But there's that famous exchange, right, when Porus is captured and brought before Alexander.
Yes. It's a legendary moment in history. Alexander asks him how he wishes to be treated. And Porus, standing tall despite his defeat and his wounds, says, "Treat me as a king treats another king." Wow. Alexander was so impressed by his dignity, and perhaps also realizing he needed a strong local ally to rule this distant land, that he gave him his kingdom back, essentially making him a vassal ally.
So Alexander wins. The path to the Ganges is theoretically open. He could have marched right into Magadha and faced the Nanda army, but he turns back. Why?
His soldiers refused. This is the famous mutiny at the Bees River. They had been fighting for years, marching thousands and thousands of miles from home. They were worn out. They were seeing endless rain, strange tropical diseases, and crucially, there were rumors.
Rumors of what?
Rumors of the mighty Nanda army waiting for them in the Ganges Valley. Travelers and locals told the Greeks about an army with thousands of war elephants, a massive infantry. The Greek soldiers, who had just struggled against Porus's relatively small elephant corps, were absolutely terrified.
They didn't want any part of that.
They essentially said, "We are not fighting an army with 5,000 elephants." They mutinied. They said, "No more."
So that Nanda reputation we talked about earlier, the wealth, the massive army, it literally saved India from a full-scale Greek invasion without a single arrow being fired.
In a way, yes. The psychological deterrence was enough. Alexander has to turn back. He retreats and dies in Babylon in 323 BC. But the effects of his invasion were profound.
How so?
By destroying all the smaller tribes and republics in the northwest to clear his path, Alexander inadvertently cleared the board. He created a power vacuum. He shattered the local powers, making it much, much easier for someone else to sweep in and unify the entire region.
And that someone else is Chandragupta Maurya. This leads us to part 4, the Mauryan Empire, the first unity.
This is where the story really gets exciting. We have Chandragupta Maurya overthrowing the oppressive Nanda with the help of the genius strategist Kautilya, also known as Chanakya.
It's the classic coup d'etat, the unpopular king and the brilliant advisor.
But Chandragupta didn't just stop at Magadha. He pushed west, right into that vacuum that Alexander had left behind. And who does he run into there? He runs into Seleucus Nakitor, Alexander's general who was holding the fort in the northwest.
So it's round 2, India versus Greece. But this time the result is very different.
Very different. In 305 BC, Chandragupta decisively defeats Seleucus. And the treaty they sign is just incredible. The Mauryas get a huge chunk of territory, Arsia, Arachosia, Gedrosia. We are talking about modern-day Afghanistan and Baluchistan.
Wow, that's a massive expansion.
The Mauryan frontier moves all the way to the Hindu Kush Mountains. It's the first time we see a nearly subcontinental empire.
And what does Seleucus get in return?
He gets 500 war elephants.
500 elephants. That sounds like a lot, but for basically all of Afghanistan, that seems like the trade of the century for Chandragupta.
It was a vital trade for Seleucus, too, who needed those beasts for his wars in the west against the other Greek successor kings. They also cemented the treaty with a matrimonial alliance, and a Greek ambassador, Megasthenes, was sent to the Mauryan capital, Pataliputra.
Megasthenes, the guy who wrote Indika.
Yes. And although the original text is lost, later Greek and Roman writers quoted him extensively, giving us this amazing window into Mauryan administration, the caste system, and the layout of Pataliputra. He described Pataliputra as a massive city with wooden walls and 64 gates.
Okay, so after Chandragupta, we briefly have his son, Bimbisara, who had the awesome title Omitragata, or Slayer of Foes, and then we land on the big one, Ashoka.
Ashoka the Great. His entire reign, and arguably the course of Indian history, turns on one pivotal event, the Kalinga War in 261 BC.
This is described in his famous Rock Edicts, isn't it?
It is, in Rock Edict 13 specifically. It is a haunting confession. Usually kings brag about their victories. Ashoka describes the slaughter. He says 150,000 were deported, 100,000 were killed, and many more died from the aftermath. He was horrified by his own victory.
And this is what led him to Buddhism.
This drove him to convert to Buddhism under the guidance of a monk named Upagupta. But let's clarify something, because this confuses a lot of people. Ashoka's Dhamma. Was he trying to force everyone to be Buddhist? Was it a state religion?
Good question.
Not at all. And this is a crucial distinction, often tested in exams. Dhamma was a moral code, not a sectarian religion. It was about social responsibility, respect for elders, kindness to slaves and servants, nonviolence towards all beings, truthfulness. It was a secular ethical code designed to hold a vast, diverse empire together.
Speaking of exams, there's a specific PYQ from the 2020 prelims that touches on this exact topic, right?
The question asked to identify the ruler who advised, whoever praises his religious sect or blames other sects through excessive devotion injures his own sect.
That sounds incredibly modern. Don't troll other religions online, or you just make your own religion look bad.
Exactly. And the answer is Ashoka. He understood that in a multicultural empire, tolerance was the only way to maintain stability. If you have Jains, Buddhists, Brahmins, and Ajivikas all at each other's throats, the state collapses. Dhamma was the glue.
Let's look at the art for a second. We mentioned Persian influence earlier. What were the Mauryan contributions?
Well, you have the Sarnath lion capital, which is our national emblem today, and the Great Sanchi Stupa. But I want to highlight the Barabar caves.
These are the rock-cut caves in Bihar?
Yes. Ashoka and his successor presented these to the Ajivikas, a sect that was actually a rival to Buddhism, which again shows his tolerance. But technically they are famous for this mirror-like polish on the inner granite walls. The technology to achieve that polish on such a hard stone is still something of a marvel. It shows the incredible level of Mauryan craftsmanship.
Okay, so empires rise and empires fall. The Mauryas eventually decline, and we enter the Post-Mauryan period. This often feels like a confusing mess of names to students. It's not one big color on the map anymore. How do we structure this?
Think of it as a split screen. In the center and south, you have native Indian dynasties taking over. The Sungas replace the Mauryas. Their founder, Pushyamitra Sunga, is known for reviving Brahmanism. Then you have the short-lived canvas. And in the Deccan, the powerful Satavahanas.
The Satavahanas are interesting. I remember the name Gautamiputra Satakarni.
He was the greatest of the Satavahana rulers. The Nasik inscription describes his achievements. He proudly claimed to be the destroyer of the Sakas, Yavanas, Greeks, and Pallavas. So he was pushing back against foreign influence.
And culturally?
Culturally, this period is very rich. King Holla, a Satavahana ruler, is credited with writing the Gatha Saptasati, or Satasai, a beautiful collection of love poems in the Prakrit language.
So the interior of India is doing its own thing. What's happening on the other side of that split screen in the northwest?
Foreign invasions, round 2. The floodgates open again after the Mauryan shield is gone. You have the Bactrian Greeks, famous for their King Menander, whose philosophical discussions with a Buddhist monk are recorded in the text Milindapana.
Then the Sakas.
Then the Sakas, or Scythians. Their most famous ruler was Rudradaman, known for the Jinnagad rock inscription, which is the first long inscription written in chaste Sanskrit. And finally, the Kushanas.
The Kushanas are massive. They controlled the Silk Road, and the big name there is Kanishka.
Kanishka is a giant of this era. He's often called the second Ashoka.
Why that comparison?
Because of his immense patronage of Buddhism. He convened the Fourth Buddhist Council in Kashmir, which was a pivotal event for the Mahayana school of Buddhism. But culturally, he is synonymous with the Gandhara school of art.
This is that blend of Greek and Indian styles, right? The Greco-Buddhist start.
Yes, exactly. If you look at a Gandhara Buddha statue, he often has the facial features of a Greek god like Apollo. Wavy hair, a Roman-style toga with heavy, realistic drapery, very realistic muscles. The technique is Hellenistic, but the subject is the Buddha. It's a perfect fusion of East and West.
And I see a note here about a UPSC PYQ linking Kanishka to important scholars.
Yes, it's really important to know who was in his court. He patronized giants like Vasamitra, the great writer Asvaghosha, who wrote the Buddha Charita, or Life of the Buddha, and the philosopher Nagarjuna. The question often asks you to identify which of these scholars were contemporary to Kanishka.
Okay, so after all this fragmentation, let's move to the next great unification. The Classical Age. The Guptas.
320 to 550 AD. This is the period often described as the Golden Age though, modern historians debate the nuances of that term, especially regarding the caste system and the status of women. But in terms of art, science, and political power, it was undeniably a high point.
Let's talk about the heavy hitters, Samudragupta.
Samudragupta is often called the Napoleon of India, a title given by the historian V.A. Smith because he was reportedly never defeated in battle. We know about his campaigns from the Allahabad pillar inscription, also known as the Prayag Prasasti, which was composed by his court poet Harisena.
And I find it so funny that he used the same pillar that Ashoka had used centuries before. Ashoka wrote about peace and Dhamma on it, and Samudragupta comes along and carves a long list of all kings he conquered right next to it.
It's a literal layering of history on stone, a conversation across centuries. But Samudragupta wasn't just a warrior.
No, his coins show him playing the veena, the musical instrument.
Exactly. The coins portray him as a poet and musician. It's that classical ideal of the warrior, scholar, king.
And then his son, Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya.
This is the absolute zenith of the Gupta Empire. He defeated the Sakas in western India, finally ending centuries of foreign rule there. But his court is what became legendary. The Navratnas, or the Nine Gems.
Including the great Kalidasa.
The Shakespeare of India, the author of Shakuntala Meghaduta. And yes, there was a 2020 prelims question that actually asked to confirm if Kalidasa was associated with Chandragupta II. He absolutely was. That's a key fact to remember.
And we also have a famous Chinese traveler, Fahin, visiting during this time, don't we?
Yes, Fahin. And his account describes a land of peace and prosperity. He knows there was no capital punishment, taxes were mild, and there were free hospitals for the poor. It paints a very rosy picture of the Gupta administration.
And the science?
Aryabhata, correctly identifying that the Earth rotates on its axis and explaining solar and lunar eclipses scientifically. And the astronomer, Varhamihira. And the art, especially the coins. There was a 2017 mains question that asked specifically about the excellence of Gupta numismatic art.
What made the coins so special?
The detail, the artistry, and the purity of the gold. They weren't just lumps of metal with a stamp. They showed the king in various dynamic poses, hunting lions with a bow and arrow, playing music, performing sacrifices. It was state propaganda, but it was beautiful, high-purity gold propaganda.
Sadly, all golden ages must end. The Huns attack from Central Asia. The empire fractures. We have one last flicker of a massive northern empire with
Harshavardhana in the 7th century. He ruled from Kannauj. We know him very well because he had a great biographer, his court poet Banapada, who wrote the Harshavarthana, and we also have the incredibly detailed account of another Chinese visitor, Huan-Tsang.
Huan-Tsang wrote the Siyuki, or Record of the Western Regions, right?
Yes. And he details the grand religious assemblies Harsha held at Kannauj and Prayag. Harsha was a great patron of learning, famously supporting Nalanda University, but politically he hit a wall when he tried to expand his empire to the south.
The Narmada River.
Exactly. He was defeated on the banks of the Narmada by Pulikesin II, the great Chalukya king of the Deccan. This battle marks a clear and lasting political boundary between the north and the Deccan.
Speaking of the south, the outline mentions the Pallavas here. They are crucial for art and architecture, aren't they?
We can't ignore them. In fact, a 2024 mains question asked specifically about the contribution of the Pallavas of Kanchi to art and literature. They were the pioneers of rock-cut temple architecture in the south. The monolithic Rathas at Mahabalipuram, the 5 Rathas, these are foundational to the entire tradition of Dravidian temple architecture.
We are moving into the medieval transition now. The 8th century brings a completely new player onto the board, the Arabs.
712 A.D., the Arab conquest of Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim. He defeats the local ruler Dahir. This is a major turning point.
This is often framed purely as a military conquest, but the source material highlights the intellectual exchange.
That's the deep dive angle. Yes, Islam is established as a political force in Sindh, but Indian knowledge numerals, astronomy, medicine, philosophy traveled from Sindh to the intellectual capital of the world at that time, Baghdad. From there, went to Europe. The concept of zero and the decimal system traveled this very route. It was a bridge of knowledge.
And finally, we have the prelude to the Delhi Sultanate, Mahmud of Ghazni.
The turn of the millennium, roughly 1000 to 1026 AD 17 raids. The destruction of the Somnath Temple is the most famous and tragic event. But from a historical perspective, we must also mention al-Biruni, the great scholar who came with him. His book, Kitab-i-Hind, is one of the most objective, detailed, and scientific analyses of Indian society of that time. It's an invaluable source.
It's a tragic note to end the political narrative on fragmentation and invasion, but it sets the stage perfectly for the next era. Now, I want to pivot to our UPSC special segment. You mentioned some specific terms from the PYQs. Let's decode them for the listeners. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay, UPSC loves its terminology. In the 2020 prelims, they asked about Kuyavapa and Dronavapa.
They sound like weapons from a video game or maybe some kind of yoga poses.
Far from it. They're actually land measurement terms used in the Gupta and post-Gupta periods. The root word vapa implies sowing. So Dronavapa basically meant the amount of land where you can sow 1 drona, a specific weight of seeds. If you didn't know the context of land grants in agriculture, you'd be completely lost.
Got it. So it's like saying a bushel's worth of land. Okay, another one. Paramitas.
This is from Buddhist philosophy. It refers to the perfections, or noble virtues, things like patience, generosity, wisdom, and effort, that a bodhisattva must cultivate over many lifetimes to attain enlightenment. It shows that UPSC doesn't just ask who was Buddha, but asks about the core nuanced philosophy.
Right. And the last one you mentioned, hundi.
This appeared in relation to the post-Harsha and early medieval period. A hundi is essentially a bill of exchange, like a pre-modern traveler's check or a promissory note. It allowed merchants to deposit money with a banker in one city and receive a note that they could cash in another city.
So they didn't have to carry sacks of gold on dangerous roads.
Precisely. It shows a sophisticated financial network was in place long before modern banking.
That's super helpful. For the men's listeners, the ones writing out those long-form answers, what's the key strategy for this era?
2 things. First, sources, sources, sources. If you are writing an answer about the decline of the Mauryas, don't just list generic reasons like weak kings. Start with, as reflected in the later Ashokan edicts, or as debated by scholars like Romila Separ regarding the Brahminical reaction. Citing the source material, whether it's an inscription or a historian, adds immense weight to your answer.
And the second point.
Art and culture is your anchor. You cannot discuss the Guptas without discussing the coins, Kalidasa, and the temples at Diogar. You can't separate the politics from the culture. In many ways, the empire was the culture it produced. They are intertwined.
Solid advice. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've gone from the 16 Mahajanapadas, fighting with clubs and chariots, through the high sophistication of the Mauryas and Guptas, all the way to the raids of Ghazni.
The recurring theme, as you see, is this oscillation between unity and fragmentation. The Mauryas and Guptas managed to unify the map into one color. The periods before and after see it shatter into a mosaic of competing pieces.
Which brings me to my final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. We kept seeing the Northwest, the Khyber Pass, the Bolan Pass as the entry point for invasion. Aryans, Persians, Greeks, Sakas, Kushanas, Huns, Turks. But Magadha, sitting safe in the east behind huge rivers and forests, became the fortress, the imperial heartland. So I have to ask, is geography the ultimate dictator of Indian history? Why was the Northwest always the open door, while the East was the throne?
It's a question that explains a lot of our geopolitical reality, even today.
A huge topic for another time. Listen, if this deep dive helped you connect the dots for your UPSC prep or just made you smarter at dinner parties, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by KPP.
And if you can, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It really does keep these deep dives alive and free for everyone.
Don't forget the free notes and practice PYQs on our public Telegram channel. And for that full library and the premium notes we mentioned, DM us on Telegram to join the private group.
Keep learning and keep questioning.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.